for their participation in 10:16. If you could all join me in the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So, I don't foresee any, the one agenda adjustment I will make in reference to time and everyone's schedules for this evening is to put off a discussion about the FY20 budget planning. We're all pretty familiar with the process. It was really intended to just kind of be a high-level overview to kind of remind people about our timelines and process, but that's something we can have a more in-depth discussion about in September, so it'll save us a little bit of time. I'll also move the approval minutes to a little bit later in the meeting, again, so that we can get to our discussion and the superintendent's overview and kind of proceed through some of the other agenda items. Process observer tonight would be Brian. But I saw a member of the public. I'm not sure if there's any public input anticipated for this evening, but welcome. And at this point, we can move right into a discussion and an overview of the audit. We invite Tim annually to come just kind of give us the overview. I disseminated the top of the audit to everybody early in the spring, again over the weekend. Just as a reminder, the audit that we're talking about is for not the fiscal year prior to the one that just ended, so it's for FY18. The audit took place over this past July, August for the fiscal year that just ended FY19. So the report that we have is for actually the prior year. So if you remember, that was the year we retired one of our bonds. That was a thing. An old teacher's contract, I think. I think those were the major things that would have been right. This is the third year of the. Is this the third year of the teacher's contract? This is the second year. Okay. So just to kind of give everybody that, right? So I think we're all familiar with Tim. He's been with us before. So with that, I'll just kind of turn it over to you.
Okay.
Talk to us a little bit, and
sure.
Then we'll follow up with some questions and things as the discussion.
All right. So I'll try to just hit the highlights and then kind of answer more of your questions if you'd like. First things first, I just always say the first report that you get right in front is our opinion, which is the point of the audit. We're here to give you an opinion on whether or not your financial statements are fairly stated or not. And it's segregated by each opinion within your financial statements, so you could have different opinions across the board, but your goal is to have an opinion on every opinion unit, and that is the case again for fiscal year 18. Your opinion units were governmental activities, which are represented in your first two exhibits. Those are a full accrual basis, and it's everything combined into one balance sheet, so if you will. So it shows your debt, shows your capital assets, it shows your other long-term liabilities that are not part of your general fund and your annual operating decision-making, really. But it is an important financial information for comparability. Is the main goal of that, of those two exhibits. Comparability with all governments across the area, across the country, really. And then you also had multiple major funds. These are your governmental funds. General fund being one of them. That's always a major fund. Major funds are determined based on quantitative factors. So every year it could change. Typically see the same fund because they typically have the same level of activity. So your food service is a major fund, your grant fund, and then your permanent fund, which represents monies held by the trustees for the town.
So Justin, do you mind questions?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so that fund that you were just talking about, that would be like our Fund 23. Like those are the things that are held?
No, the extendable trust.
Oh, the extendable trust.
The permanent is the high school funds by halls, which you don't even put on your books. Those ones, but the expendable are on your. You do subtract the expendable
All right.
permanent fund and that separate completely, because it's just you get that nuclear trust. You get that.
Right, okay.
So nothing else that's pointed out really in the auditor's opinion report itself, the 2 pages. Like I said, as in past years, it was clean. There will be, for the fiscal year 19, there will be one additional paragraph describing a change in accounting standards, GASB 75, that's going to be applicable to fiscal year 19, which is
in reporting of the OPEB, which you have been reporting already under GASB 45. So it's not, it's just a change in, it's a change in accounting principle because it is a new standard, but it's taking an old liability and an old expense and kind of upgrading it, if you will. The management discussion analysis is prepared by the school district itself. We make sure the numbers correspond with the numbers in your financial statements because the whole report is your figures. But other than that, we're not making a judgment onto factors within the management discussion analysis. For the most part, it's very broad and explains your different funds and explains some overall financial position. But really the detail I find is in the financial statements themselves is a little more useful. But it is required, so. So exhibits 1 and 2, again, are your governmental activities. These are full accrual basis. For the year ended June 30th, 2018, you can see the very bottom line, the total net position for the school district was $3,871,813. The bulk of that is made up of net investment in capital assets, buildings, equipment. That's net of depreciation and net of any outstanding debt, which you do have the middle school renovations still outstanding. Then you can see the restricted for endowments, as we just talked about. Those are the trust funds held by the town. And then you have unrestricted, and you see a deficit for the unrestricted balance. The reason the bulk of that is your net pension liability, which is almost $15 million liability. I discuss every year with everywhere I go. Nothing you can do about that. This retirement system's got their plan in place through contribution rates and so on, how to recoup that, if you will. But you have no corresponding asset on your books, and that's why you have a big deficit showing. You wouldn't want the state has the asset, if you will, through the pension. Exhibit 2, the only thing to point out here would be the change in your net position. You can see there's actually a decrease of about $900,000 from the year before. And I jump around a little bit, and forgive me, but Exhibit 6 kind of will show you the factors that got you to that change. So for the most part, it's because your depreciation expense is not recorded, of course, in the governmental funds. And then the other large amount was when you factor in the change for modified accrual, your annual contributions for the retirement system to what your actual pension expense is. That was a change about $460,000 greater, a larger expense than what's on your expenditures in the general fund. So both of those factors were the main things that resulted in that $900,000 change. Exhibit 3, this is your governmental funds. This is your general fund, food service, grants, etc. Exhibit 3 is the balance sheet. You can see, jump into fund balances. Total fund balance for the general fund, $1,256,000, made up of multiple categories. You have non-spendable, about $25,000. That's your prepaid items. Cash has already gone out the door, but it's expense for the next year, so it's prepaid. So you don't have that in fund balance. Committed fund balances, this actually represents the trust fund, the expendable trust fund balances, capital reserves and other expendable trusts. This, for reporting purposes, in accordance with GAAP, trust funds are shown in the general fund in your financial statements. If you go to the back, your supplemental schedules do not desegregate it. So, but, and that's a decision too. If you ever felt that you prefer not to show them, there's a way we could show it as a capital project fund, because essentially mostly most of the trust funds are for capital purposes. Sometimes you do a special education trust that you could argue is not a capital purpose. And then you really would have no way to report that separate. Assigned fund balance, the $152,000 figure there, that represents purchase orders, open purchase orders. That management, it's assignments your lowest level, management can dictate that through the PO process. And then you're left with your unassigned fund balance, $604,000.
So that net unassigned is the amount that goes to the return to the taxpayer.
Correct. Yep.
Uh-huh.
Correct. And Exhibit 5 shows you your statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. So you can see total revenues, $20,616,000. Total expenditures, $20,818,000. So you had a deficiency of revenues under expenditures of $202,000. You had the transfer in from those permanent funds, $4,000. So you had a net change in fund balances of $198,197 from the prior year. Exhibit 4 is just the conversion between governmental funds, modified accrual, the full accrual. This shows you what your total capital assets are, your total long-term liabilities by category. And again, further detail is found in the notes to the financial statements, so it gives you a good breakdown of all those. We went over Exhibit 6. Exhibit 7, that's your budgetary basis. You only have a few items. Let me jump to my note. The difference between Exhibit 7 and Exhibit 5 represents your encumbrances, how they're shown. So on Exhibit 7, encumbrances are rolled right into expenditures so that you can see a true picture of where your budget is left at. Whereas Exhibit 5, an encumbrance is not an expenditure. You haven't had that work, you haven't had those services provided, those goods received. So those expenditures show up in the next year. So you can see in Exhibit 7, estimated revenues of $20,630,000. Actual revenues came in slightly under at $20,614,000. Mostly in federal, probably Medicaid. It's hard to know what you're going to get with that figure. Your appropriations was $21,488,000. Your actual expenditures $20,745,000. So you had a budget surplus there of you had appropriations over expenditures of $743,000. Your transfers in, again, you had the $4,000 from the trust funds, and your budgeted transfer out $187,000. So you had a net change in fund balance of $313,000. You expected, you can see that original final budget line, the first column, you had a net change in fund balance there of just over $1 million. So that's your expected loss, if you will. And so you had a loss of $313,000, which means you actually had a $700,000 positive result. Non-spendable fund balance increased from the year before, about $600. Your committed fund balance, which here represents your March meeting during that fiscal year that you're voting for the next fiscal year, if there's any votes from surplus as of, say, July 1st of 2019 or 18, those are committed at that moment in the general fund because you know you're going to send that off to the trust funds. So that figure actually decreased from the year before by $27,000. So that rolls into unassigned fund balance. So all those factors, you can see how you started the year just about $900,000 unassigned and ended the year at $600,000 unassigned. Further budget breakdown show up in the back schedules. It just gives you each function line for those main categories. After that, we have a food service budget schedule, the same concept as the general fund. Here, obviously, the food service, you budget revenues to equal expenditures, unless you were in a situation where you had to subsidize, but you do not here. So for fiscal year 18, food service program started the year with a fund balance of $16,000, and they ended the year at $43,000. They had an increase of about $27,000. And I can highlight for fiscal year 19, as I've already mentioned to Kelly, that they increased about another $100,000. Wow. So you actually have gone over the threshold that you were allowed to have for fund balance. It's a tough program.
We're back there again.
Yeah.
It's been a while though. since that's,
Yes, it has.
that's
Yeah.
taken place, so.
Yeah, and it was your expenditures were higher than fiscal year 19 expenditures are higher than 18, but the revenues that came in were just so much greater,
Yeah.
so.
Our new food service director.
I'm telling you, it was, yeah.
Grants funds, those always, again, budget, you estimate your revenues equal to your appropriations, and again, it's hard to know what grant activity you're going to have, so that budget number is really the least predictive of your results, if you will, of any of the funds you have. So here you were over by $7,400, but the revenues came in, of course, matching that. So, and then the last exhibit on your basic financial statements is the agency fund exhibit, and this is your student activity funds. And this is both activities combined. You had cash balance at the end of the year of $119,000. For fiscal year 19, there's another accounting, GASB 84 is an accounting change that will apply, and it's ultimately not going to affect very much because it's going to move your activity funds onto your special revenue fund, so it's going to show up on Exhibit 3 and 5 now. It's not a fund that is budgeted. It's not a factor into your tax rate setting process at all, but it is now no longer considered a fiduciary fund because there's a lot of, and I even brought my little guide, there's a lot of a lot of different nuances in what your literal policies are on paper for activity funds, who has administrative control. Do administrators have control in the sense that they can say, no, you can't do that, or do they have the control and say, I got to sign off on this check? They don't have any authority to stop that club from spending that money. So it's a club-by-club kind of analysis of whether
It actually belongs in student activity.
who really ultimately has say. Yeah, are you truly just being a custodian and making sure that nothing improper is going on, however, can't stop a theater club from buying a new curtain or something that maybe administration would say, but the club wants to do it, and so and then do the district policies allow that sort of activity or prohibit it? If they prohibit that stuff, which is perfectly fine, that's just that's just a stronger example of you're not a custodian. This is within the district, so it's kind of twofold, looking at policies over activities as a whole, and then looking at what actual activities you have. When you're talking the Hollis and Brookline individual districts, when you're talking to the elementary school, they have much less of an argument to say that they're really independent of administrative decision making. I mean, those younger classes are not really truly making those decisions on how to spend that money. So it's more clear cut, but with the middle school and high school, you do have a little more nuance, if you will. So that would be a change in fiscal year 19. Other than that, I will wait for questions on specifics within the notes themselves, and I'll just tell you, we can jump to the management letter at the end. This is where I identify any concerns or other matters that we just feel like we want to communicate in writing to you. Minor things, we always talk with Kelly and her staff if something comes to attention that we need to. But I think this is a good tool as well to communicate any true issues. So I will share. I don't withhold information if it's true, if it's something that's really if I'm dealing. I will have told Kelly and I've told her staff while we're there in our field work, but I will also like to communicate too. So. The fact that you don't have many is a good thing. So last year, for fiscal year 18, we did comment on the high school activities fund. We noticed that there was some class accounts that go back a few years. Once a class leaves your school, there's really all you now have is risk and no reward to having those classes have their money in your hands because they're gone. So you probably already have a policy, but it should be enforced as far as making sure that money goes with those classes when they graduate, or they've been encouraged to donate back to school in some form. And then we did note some disbursements missing either check request form or an invoice or other documentation, which we did find, again, a few instances for fiscal year 19, so it is something just to keep at those bookkeepers, really. And those
How can that happen?
How can that
That we
happen?
wouldn't have a invoice or a,
Well, this is all happening at the high school away from us, so they have their procedures that they're supposed to follow, but, paperwork is missing, procedures are not always followed to the T. So we're trying to make that better.
but if I'm understanding it, there's checks issued without an invoice.
So they probably had a check request form, but
Right.
no backup, and then someone signed off and said, I know what this is, it's okay to,
Right.
So there's kind of I don't think we did not, I'm not saying we saw both. There was either a check request form or an invoice. We'd like to see both.
So
That's
in
the
that
policy.
example, do you have an amount?
I don't.
Like a total?
Not with me, no. No.
They're
We
usually
had
are.
one that had, we did have one that didn't have either.
So
No,
how many transactions like that are in the course of a year? So if we have 1 out of 500, maybe that's not
at least 500,
that's
yeah.
that much of an issue.
Right.
But maybe some training needs to happen.
I think
But
it's,
if this is happening 20% of the time, then it's a major
I
problem.
don't think it's
No.
a training issue, it's just a everyday, something
Okay.
slipped through the cracks issue, because they know the procedures.
And they tend to be the type of transaction that's a little more, someone comes in and performs in the library or something, or they have a deposit on a trip where the balance payment has an invoice, but the deposit was someone probably on the phone said, you just need to send us $1,000 to get this field trip rolling, or whatever the
Right.
situation may be, and that wasn't documented very well.
Just internally, does Linda, I'm assuming Linda, because she's
Mhm.
the co-op person, does she go over, to come here over to the high school at any point during the year, just kind of do a cursory review of the
Well,
students?
yeah, and they have to, on a monthly basis, send over their financial statements. So she does absolutely do
Mhm.
a review, and she and I have worked a lot this year to clean things up a little
Yeah.
bit. It wouldn't be reflected in FY19, it will be more reflected in FY20.
Mhm.
So, yeah, we've brought some things over to Fund 23 that really should be there instead of with student activities, so,
Right.
we
I-
do continually try to.
I know I ask you every year as we go through the budget cycle about Fund 23, because that's just another fund where it seems to be kind of like when you mentioned the class accounts, that the money kind of sits there. Maybe it was donated with a very specific purpose that we kind of can't fulfill anymore, so the money sits there. How do we resolve that? That type of thing. It just, I think there might have been, we'll look at it again as we go through the budget
Right.
cycle, but it just is always one of those things that you say, is there any, legally, how do we release the money? Do you return it? What do you do to, because it just kind of really sits there and we don't
Yep.
use it,
Yep.
so.
There are a few like that.
Yeah, I mean, if, I would say if donated money, you can probably put into a trust fund with the town, and then you just make a request when it needs to be spent in accordance to, but you have to research that, go back to, who donated it to you, and
Right,
if
right.
there's putting stipulations, where's that documentation and so on,
Right,
but.
right.
Right, like the Ruth Wheeler Fund, for
That one,
instance.
yeah.
That one has a very specific documentation on how it's to be used, and that we just don't have that
Right. It just doesn't come up as
anymore,
a
yeah.
possibility.
Going back to the checks for a minute, you said that there was also, if I understand it right, there was also some of the same situation in 19?
Yeah, we did find that again, yes. I
So
think.
that this seems like that's an easy problem to solve.
Mhm.
You would think, but, in the day-to-day course of doing transactions and timing, we need this check right now, or this is, gonna happen. There's a lot of transactions that hit one person in the high school, and almost as much in the middle school, so, yeah, I mean,
So
I
we
think
have a
it's,
policy in place that we can't fulfill. We can't follow our own policy.
I would say 98% of the time they're following it exactly.
But if the answer is, it's a tough policy to follow, that means we're really not following the policy.
I don't think it's a tough policy to follow. I think it's just things are going to slip through the cracks in the course of daily operations when she's dealing with that many transactions.
I would just be, in my own business, I would be concerned about an invoice, a check getting cut without an invoice attached to it.
Understood. I'm sure I can find out what those exact circumstances are if you'd like, but I really think it's not a concern because it happens very rarely. And it's usually not a lot of
happens every
dollars.
year.
But it's not a lot of dollars we're talking about. It might be $30, it might be $100. I mean, it's unlikely that it's
Is there any way to get an order of
significant.
magnitude on that for the next meeting?
I can
Whether
Probably,
it's
yeah.
try to.
annually
It'll have to depend on
$500 or
Tim.
$50,000?
Okay. Yep, we can do that.
I believe, because I looked at today, I believe we tested around 75% for each school of the total disbursement dollar amount that went out the door, and I think we had, so now I don't know the number of transactions that was, but I know our, the notes to how many issues we had was about 8 transactions, so if you're 75% of 1,000, or, you know, and so I'm not sure. I don't know the total number of transactions. I can probably find that
So
out.
just an order of magnitude, so you're seeing kind of going in and out of the high school student activities fund, like $250,000. So it's kind of the opening and beginning balances are in the 90s, opening balance of 91,000, 240,000 of additions, 230,000 of deductions, and 97,000 as an ending balance at the high school.
All right, thank you.
You have like in my business, we tend to have presentations with something called bottom line up front. The 30-second or 1-minute summary. What is the message to us if you had to do that bottom line up front?
Bottom
What are we
line,
doing?
based on fiscal year 18 and what I've seen in 19, you're running basically pretty straightforward, flat. I'm not seeing big peaks and valleys.
So that's good.
Yes, very good. For
So on
fiscal
a
year,
grade from 0 to 100, you would give us a 99?
sure. Fiscal year 19, I did look at the general fund. I had just sent trial balances yesterday and today for the various districts. Overall fund balance in the general fund decreased by 62,000, but the unassigned increased about 25,000. So there was some shifting of categorized. So the amount that's going to go back, return to taxes, is going to go up a little bit from fiscal year 18.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just curious, do you see any districts that own their own school buses or SAUs?
I have one that leases the actual buses themselves versus leasing through a company.
Versus
it's
a
rare.
company handling, so that's rare, and
Yeah.
so that's one out of how many?
15 or so. We have more towns than schools, but,
Okay,
Yeah.
so you've seen it, but,
right, yeah. Most just, higher
yeah,
outside.
no, I know, I was just curious if
Right.
you'd seen it. And my second question is, our debt ratio, is it excellent or average, or
I haven't run that
the amount
number
of debt that
specifically.
we're carrying? Well,
but
no,
I'm sure it's
I'm just
very
asking
low.
generalized,
Yeah.
from what you see.
Yeah, you're very low. Yeah, that are you at 3.5 or 3.6 million? Yeah, that's low for the size of the district for sure.
Low, very low?
Yeah, very low. Usually I would see, depending on the number of buildings you had, some debt related to each building at
Yeah.
some point. And so
Yeah.
the fact that you just have the one outstanding renovation bond, that's good.
Okay. Thank you.
Tim, do you have any sense for, on the pension liability, do you have any sense for the rate at which this district is paying, when will be, when the liability will be satisfied?
I don't know that answer, no. I guess the only sense I get is from the retirement system and the fact that they actually are dropping the rates a little bit for, I think it's 2021 or 1920, well, 19 to 21. I think that's an encouraging sign for sure, that
Do they have
their actuaries are saying, okay, you've
Right.
kind of caught up a little bit. In that
Do they
sense,
have
so.
a date at which we are trying to get that reconcile?
No, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah. Okay.
So in essence, the state has pushed their whole liability down to each district, and our portion is being carried as a negative amount.
Right. Yeah, they had to a few years ago figure out how much each district
Right.
owned of that when they didn't have to in the history that beyond.
The rates themselves for the contribution rates, it's basically like a 30-year mortgage to
Yeah.
pay everything back, and I don't know what year we're in, like year 8 or something like that, so.
Yeah, there is a schedule that shows you're up to the last 5 years. You can see your contributions annually as a percentage of the total payroll that are of the employees in the system. You can see, that your share has fluctuated. They changed their actuarial factors, probably their discount rate, their interest rate, and so on. 2 years ago, it looks like, because you did have a $5 million increase, and then it's starting to come back down. So, as far as the system's funding of it, it's fluctuated from about 58% to 65% of the total. Goal would be 100, of course, but I believe it's 64% now for fiscal year 19, so it's going back up.
I would be more excited if it was this year's instead of 2 years ago.
That would have been a miracle, because I think, Tim, you're here for a 3-week period.
We were here for,
No,
7 days, the
that's
week
right.
of the 12th, August 12th, so just 2 weeks ago. It took us 7 days. Our best has been 4, we were joking about it while we were there. Our best was 4 days. 7 days was longer than has in the past, but it's also, my firm we're one less than we were when we used to come,
right.
so that's a big factor. So newer people, one new person as well as one less person, so.
So, yeah, there's some.
But I think we actually were more, further along than we have been in the past too, so it was worth the extra 2 days, really,
Yeah, great.
in my opinion, so.
Awesome. And your firm has been doing our audits for, I don't.
It'd be fiscal year 10 or 11 would
Yeah.
probably be our first audit.
So,
Yeah.
okay, great.
I can speak to the BA, who was BA at the time.
Yeah.
versus what year it was.
There's a mystery right there.
There's been a few
I don't
in
even think we could all
between.
name, we could name them all, so. Well, thank you very much.
Yes,
my pleasure.
Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
If anyone does have any questions that you'd like to have some additional follow-up, send them along and I can get them to you.
Absolutely.
I sincerely appreciate the work.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We can kind of combine the financial update and the school board update, which were, I think the progress on the field in robotics kind of addresses some portion of the school board meetings and kind of the topics that you covered over the summer, so I'd like to.
Yeah, I'd just like to run through I'll call a variety of things, just so you're kind of aware. First of all, I actually had to start with just thanking Kelly and her group for the 4 audits. I don't think people understand necessarily what that means or what that does to the business office for about 7 days in the summer. They do an outstanding job, and I think that shows in our reports. I also wanted to let the BudCom know a little transportation update. On August 6th, Student Transportation of America took official ownership of Hollis Transportation. Hollis Transportation's management is still in place. With that, in a very short period of time, 10 new buses arrived. We installed updated security cameras in the fleet. They added safety updates. Two of the biggest things where they did a number of new radios, and they added to almost all the buses the safety bar, which forces a child to come out so that the driver can see the child. It's a much safer piece. I happened to get stopped by one of our own buses, and it was one of our kindergarten students, and it really makes a big deal when you're talking about somebody about 2 feet tall. You cannot see them without those bars, so that's a recent update. The bus barn has had a transformation in itself. They have a new gravel area for all the buses. For the first time, the bus barn will have running water and a bathroom. They've been working off a porta potty for the last 40 years. So the drivers and the people there are excited about that. They have a full complement of drivers. I want to just highlight, when we talked about this last year, we talked about cross-rostering, and that's actually what we're doing right now. We have 2 drivers from a different terminal that are with us for the foreseeable future because we have 2 drivers in training. That is something that we couldn't have done in the past, so it's a really nice benefit. STA is also with the Merrimack School District, the Londonderry School District, the Ware School District, so we have a number of people around us. So from an athletic standpoint, it gives you a lot of people to pull from in an afternoon when there's multiple contests. So I think we get small town management with big delivery national company. So I think it's kind of the best of both worlds. So everything went off. We had one minor thing today, and that was just more. We had some new students move in and had to adjust the route kind of quickly, but that was taken care of and everything goes well there. On the robotics, for those of you who were able to come a little early, we were able to give you a tour. I want to thank our custodians first and foremost for doing an awful lot of the work, but the science lab, which was the old robotics room, has completely been redone. New flooring, the cabinets are installed, and the cabinets were taken out of the other room. They look brand new. Countertops, new sinks, all of that's done. The teacher's in. We started the first day with kids in there with no problem. The robotics room is complete. We're still doing some minor pieces. The only major piece was we still have to cut the door between tech ed and robotics. That is, we're looking at potential dates, but we do believe, we've told robotics it's probably more likely to happen closer to the winter break. And that's because we did encounter asbestos when we pulled up cabinets. So we encapsulated that, brought in the asbestos company, and they would be the company coming back to make that cut, because obviously it's got to be enclosed to do that cut. The school board has also been working with robotics and tech ed, and the equipment, vast majority of the equipment has now arrived and is being set up by our new teacher. There are 2 pieces to understand. There are some pieces that I would call shared equipment. There are some pieces that are strictly robotics and some pieces that are strictly tech ed. Some of the tech ed replacements, as we got into this summer, we realized there were some safety concerns with some of the older pieces. So those we will just take care of through the operating budget because they were not a robotics expense, but it was something, even if we weren't doing robotics and we went in there this summer, we would be replacing that because of safety issues. With regard to the robotics, I do want to thank them. We were able to purchase equipment and at the same time secure approximately $20,000 in donations through the hard work and dedication of the robotics group. One of the significant pieces of equipment, and I don't totally understand it, I know it's about 80 inches high and it's very important, but that's about all I know. But it was purchased through one of our sponsors who purchases significant amounts of machinery, so they were able to get a purchasing discount for us. So a $42,000 piece of equipment came in at $35,000, and then this gentleman donated $10,000 worth of all the bits and tools that go along with this. They also had a purchase of a 3D printer. They went out and were able to find an educational discount, which resulted in about $5,000 through the robotics program. So it's been a joint effort. And at 4 o'clock today, the new tech ed teacher and the robotics folks met and kind of went through the final layout as we start to put in machinery and all that. So that's gone really well, and I think we have a much safer place for all the kids in our school district who utilize the rooms. And I think we also have a new teacher with tech ed who's really going to drive our curriculum forward and take us to more of a STEM approach. We will still have many of the traditional pieces, but we'll get into some new pieces of curriculum. This is just something kind of keeping you back in your mind. The state of New Hampshire every year publishes a critical shortage list for teachers. It's the largest the list has ever been. And I'll give you the example that shocked me. I've never seen history or social studies on the list. and now they are. We're just not seeing as many people enter education for a variety of reasons. That also typically happens when we have a robust economy, because if you're a math major or a chem major, you can go into a different career and make more money. So we do see that. So we have had a little bit of a struggle hiring some folks. We were fully staffed, as Rick told the board the other night, and then we made the decision to hire one of our own staff members, Yolanda Flamino, is becoming the new assistant principal at the middle school. She's a science teacher at the high school, so her transfer to the middle school will be completed once we backfill her position. But we're very excited to bring her on board. Mr. Bonds, at our last school board meeting, put forward a 5-year technology plan. He's going to be coming to the budget committee like he traditionally does, so he'll walk you through that. It's what I always say in phase 1. I'm not sure the numbers in that packet will be the actual numbers, but we always like to start high, and nobody ever likes to see the number go up.
So the details of that tech plan were in the board packet.
Right. One thing that we are also doing this year, we're working with the Nashua Regional Transportation Group to look at our traffic flows throughout the town of Hollis, between our buses and the primary schools and parent pickups and athletic runs, and one means of egress in and out of the high school. Kelly reached out. This group is somebody who comes in and brings their expertise. It's at no cost to us. They don't do the engineering, they don't do the work, they give you the proposals that you now know what is the best way to attack the problems. So sometime during the year, you'll be getting an update on that. For anybody who might be out there watching, you will see some individuals at the Hollis schools and the high school and middle school. They'll be clicking traffic flow, they'll be doing some short videos of trying to gain knowledge. We have alerted the police to that because I'm sure parents could get concerned, and each of the principals will be notifying as well. But we do know they're there and they are sanctioned by us. I also want to just take 1 second to thank our custodians. If you've done any of our tours, our buildings are in great shape. They just take great pride in their buildings, and we're truly blessed to have such wonderful individuals working for us. So we opened up with just a wonderful year. Field update. First of all, just so you know, the field committee, which meets every Tuesday, we have a standing meeting, is Cindy Van Conant is on it. Tom Whalen represents both our boosters and the community at large. Brian Bumpus represents athletics. Kelly, Gina, and I are on it. And then John Lorden is our engineer expert from Teague and Bond. And Jamie Witten is the construction company experts. So we meet every Tuesday. The field goes very, very well. If you haven't been out there, or we meet every Tuesday. Next Tuesday's meeting at 1:30 happens to be at the field. If you wanted to come along and tag along, you're most welcome. And then we'll have our formal meeting after we do that. Trees are gone. Field is actually mapped out. The 4 corners are staked. They are now beginning what I would call the grading, and it might not be the right term, but the grading. And the drainage equipment has arrived, so they'll be installing the piping and everything. So everything will drain down. If I'm looking at the high school, it will all drain down towards Love Lane, to the catch basins that we installed at the request of Beaver Brook. So that will be the catch basins. We, with the board's permission, picked the logo for the field. It will be simply the letters HB in blue and white with the green background. And the expected completion date is mid-November. There were 4 alternatives that we priced, just so you know that. We asked for an alternative price on the light bases, which are just the standards, not the lights themselves. A gravel parking area, the road up to the actual field, and the foundation for the scoreboard. The reason we did those as alternatives was because I really wanted to get through what I'll call phase 1, because I wanted to make sure, there was the potential, and I think still is the potential, to potentially encounter ledge. So we wanted to make sure we didn't allocate all the money, that we had a way of addressing anything that has come up. Knock on wood, nothing has come up yet. We are in discussions. We talked with Quirk Construction. we may decide not to put the light bases in, just because then we don't want to have it look like an unfinished field. You know, we're working with boosters and donors on bleachers, and once you get bleachers, everything else is included in the $1,473,000. So you have a completed field. The potential would be if we weren't able to raise the lights money right away, you would have these 4 bases around the field that would just sit there. And technology continues to change daily, so it's like, do you want to get locked in? Because once we buy the bases from a certain company, we have to go back to that company for the poles. So that is a committee debate. I'll be honest, I think we're leaning to not putting them in. You'll still have all conduit under the ground. We'll still have the markings. And the 4 bases are not inside the field. They're outside the field, behind the fencing. So you don't have to worry about coming back and doing any damage to your field. And we did take a tour 2 days ago to make sure that we have enough clearance to bring what I would call the auger in that would have to drill this base. So that's it. We do intend, obviously, to do the scoreboard foundation, but we're just holding off on that, because if we hit ledge, we could always go to the athletic trust for that piece. And then the gravel parking lot will add approximately 33 spaces next to the field, which will also help us because we're having parking issues at the high school. If you're not aware, our enrollment right now is probably somewhere 865 to 875, which is up. So the NASDAQ projections seem to be starting to come true. And then everything else goes well, you know, with regards to the field. I just want to give you a quick highlight. We have done round 1 for budget. That means the principals and their department heads and the custodians give us everything, you know. It's kind of more of a wish list at this point, and then Kelly, Gina, Bob, and I will start to slash that down and get it ready to, what I'll say, be presentable. But I just wanted to give you a heads up a little bit. The only piece of staffing we're looking at is around special ed, because those numbers are fluctuating back and forth, and we see a slight increase. And what I mean by a slight increase, we have it targeted at right now about a 0.6. So we're not sure what the solution will be, but you'll hear more discussion about that. We're also examining our administrative capacity, and what I mean by that is, you know, middle school, high school athletics, we staffed appropriately? Do we have too much staffing? So we're taking a look at that. And then we're also looking at our maintenance staffing. One of the things that we'll be talking about throughout the budget season, whether it's in the SAU budget or distributed over the different district budgets, is a facilities director. I don't think with the amount of maintenance that's starting to be needed for buildings that are 20, 25 years old, that we can continue to do what we're doing. And the way that process works now is either Kelly, Gina, or I kind of take over a project and see it from start to finish. Kelly gets every single thing to do with the dollar end of it, you know, in her departments. And then Gina and I do more of the visiting the sites. One of the decisions we made, I know the board had wanted me to hire somebody to oversee the field, but when you look at what people are getting for an hourly rate, I go to the field before I start my day. It's part of my lunch schedule, and then I usually visit it before I leave. I have a wonderful tan. I probably will have to charge the district for a new pair of shoes, because today I forgot that the water would make mud. So it was an adventure on the field today. But it goes extremely well, and I'm very pleased with the way robotics turned out, the relationship that's being established between our new tech teacher and the robotic students. You know, again, it's going to be a difficult time, as it always will be. We're still waiting to find out what the state is doing with the budget. So we don't have concrete numbers yet. We hope to have those soon. And I know the governor put together another proposal for the legislature, and hopefully they'll arrive at some, at least concrete item that we can start to plan off of. And that's a little frustrating. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. And I do intend to be back at future meetings.
So just following up on the robotics,
Mhm.
planning, implementation, development. In the board packet, there was a spreadsheet of financials. I did watch a portion of the board meeting, or some of the public commentary, board discussion, and things like that took place. So I think in future, just, well, for now, I'd like an understanding of the 98,000,
Mhm.
are we anticipating spending half, all, two-thirds, and then I, like, as you kind of
Mhm.
make the purchases, align things, and, manage remediation for asbestos and things like that, maybe just an update in the September, October timeframe of where those expenses, an update to that spreadsheet, and where those expenses are actually falling out.
Exactly, and our intent is to update the spreadsheet. As I told people during the tour and told the school board, there were some pieces of equipment in tech ed that were safety related that we would replace automatically. And I necessarily wouldn't even go to the school board. I mean, if something breaks tomorrow, Kelly and I don't sit there and not fix it. And none of these expenses, we're talking about equipment that's $1,500, $2,000. The major purchases, like the significant robotics purchase of about $35,000, $36,000, that stuff will always go to the board, and that will be categorized in robotics. One of the columns that we just haven't had time to get to is what will come out of the operating budget. We also have included the donation for pieces, and then we still have to go back and do like the asbestos final pieces, the cutting of the door, because originally we were talking about 2 doors. After meeting with robotics and the new teacher, we went down to 1 door. So I think we'll be able to give a very concrete accounting. I do believe just on the equipment that we're looking at, you're going to spend the whole amount between the facility space and robotic equipment, and then some, what I'll call shared equipment.
Can I change to the donation to the field?
Sure.
Of $150K?
Yep. It's in the bank.
When I was
Can we
reading it,
thank someone?
it wasn't clear to me what the stipulation or the conditions were for how that money is to be spent. So I just want to make it clear
Sure.
what it's for and what it's not for.
Right. The stipulation is the donor has asked that it go to enhance the field.
So what does that mean, enhance the field?
I would say like bleachers, something that was not necessarily part of it. That's what I look at as an enhancement, and I believe that's what their
So
intent
it's
is.
not that we're reducing debt, not to help pay for the principal and the bond?
That's correct.
Okay.
But the 1.47 is the 15% basically of the 166. So we're right in there. And I should also point out that Barbara King, who's, I'll call it president of HB Elevates, and Tom Whalen are both now, because the field's in progress, starting to work on fundraising events.
Okay.
And I want to thank Jarrell Smith, who's a Brookline resident. He has, is working close with me. He contacted me the other day, and he's starting to go after what I'll call those people who would want to maybe, $50 to $500 to offset that. And I think once it's all said and done, once we get through the alternatives, we're gonna come in on very close to target, and I think over the years we'll get ahead of the game.
Is there consideration being given to like naming rights to the field, or sponsorship of the school board, things like that?
We have not done any naming rights. Nobody's asked about that.
Okay.
That would be a discussion, but it would be something I would have to take to the school board. And the conduit for the donations right now is HB Elevates. And then at some point in the future, the school board will be brought a motion to accept the donation, and we'll define basically what it was for.
So aside
Bill.
from, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So aside from bleachers, you had mentioned fencing. Is the fencing that's going around the field, is that temporary, or is that?
That's included.
It's included.
Right.
So we have bleachers, lights, fencing, but there's no consideration for like press or coach's box, concessions,
bleachers.
restrooms.
If-
So the
if-
coach's box would be
Right.
with
To give you
bleachers.
an idea, the magnitude of the bleachers would be around $200,000, because you would be buying a set that includes your press box as well as be ADA compliant.
Okay, and it would be like one side of the field or?
One side holds 1,000 people.
Okay, and then not yet, is there space or consideration for like a concession area, restrooms?
There is if you were to go drive over right now, you'd see a clump of trees that was not removed.
Yes,
Okay.
I saw that yesterday, and I wondered about it.
Right. That area probably ultimately is the ideal location for that kind of concession stand, because then we could bring water from the high school
Right.
straight down. So in the plans, there's, the location for bleachers is already there, so
Okay.
everything is designed, and the 1.47 gets you everything to play, just nothing to watch.
Right.
So you can play every sport that we have. You have the fencing, you have the
Uprights.
scoreboards included in that.
football,
Yeah, you'll have,
fields,
you'll have uprights, you'll have everything that's needed. Yeah.
Sorry, Mark.
So there was a lot of discussion about donations being made to offset the expense of the bond.
Mhm.
And so those are gone now? I mean, that discussion has ended?
No, absolutely not. But right now, the 1.47 is 85% of the total amount, and we were trying to raise 15%. So the piece is that if we decide to go with the alternates, we're looking at funding for those. So what we had said, Lauren, was that we were looking to raise 15%. Now, we're able to keep the cost down 15% below the maximum. And it's been a little frustrating, because if we hadn't had the delays, I'm guessing the field would have been, A, we would have got a better interest rate, and B, the field would have been probably a little more cost-effective from when we had to go out and bid. So I think when it's all said and done, we're going to meet our targets all the way around.
So these new donations that you're talking about people going for, those will be to reduce the bond?
No, they'll be for enhancement of the field. And I'll be honest with you.
150K is for enhancement of the field.
Right, and I'll be honest with you, that originally was to use any way we wanted. And then after everything took place between the lawsuits and everything that took place, the person called me back and said, I'll still make the donation, but only if you choose to enhance the field, because you've already kind of spent my money by the delays. I'm just
Yeah,
being,
okay. All right, we'll take that with a grain of salt.
I'm just transferring.
Is there any conversation, Kelly, or any thoughts on possible refinancing this? My recollection is the bond was issued, it's prepayment, there's no prepayment penalty?
Correct. And I know that the Hollis and Co-op boards were going to be taking up debt. So I think that's going to be on your plate in the coming months. I think there's a good possibility to turn that over to a better interest rate.
Yep.
I agree with you on that.
I think the New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank will actually do kind of an overall assessment to determine if it's optimal financing, if it's an optimal move to make.
Mhm.
So,
Well, now, it's possible that we don't need a prepayment option anymore.
that.
Because the reason we need the
possible,
prepayment
yes.
option is we were going to get these massive donations that were going to offset it. And since they probably aren't going to happen, we might not have to worry about that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The bond bank did come in with their last sale at a significant, well, it was significantly lower than I think even they were anticipating. So it's hard to, again, it's always hard to assess, but I think they could be pretty helpful. So I think Jillian McNeil, she personally.
Okay.
And we can get the Japanese to give us a loan, and it could be minus interest rates.
There we go. Germans do.
Right?
Anybody in the world.
Right.
I guess could you touch, I guess, a little bit on the number of new students? Because I know you mentioned the high school were up some. I'm wondering what that percentage is. How many new kids here in this school?
I probably will come back to that, Matt. I will say that, I want to say that in a conversation with Tim, that we're looking at 20 to 30 new, what was a small 8th grade class is no longer a small 8th grade class. It's a normal size 8th grade class. And then the high school, 865 is probably as close to when I started. And I see the numbers coming, as you know, in
Yes.
Brookline and in Hollis. Our enrollments, again, we had a a grade, I think it was second grade in Hollis, that was kind of small. We actually debated whether it was 3 teachers or 4 teachers. Well, that is now basically filled. So, and then Brookline's experiencing a few new housing developments. So, a few.
Really?
Yeah. And I don't, I'm working with the planning board because in Hollis, because they're coming out with a new kind of master plan description, and they have asked me to weigh in on the schools, so I'll be providing them with a kind of our summary from the school side, just so they can continue to plan. Yeah.
I think for Brooklyn, we're up like 30 kids, 40 kids
Yeah,
move-ins over the summer.
yeah, that was at RMMS, yeah.
So we got bubbles forming that are eventually going to work their way up to here.
Well, and the interesting part was, many of the move-ins in Brookline were in the primary school, but they were the oldest in the family. So it wasn't like we were getting, historically, since I've been here, it's been more, we get a high school, a middle school, and maybe one elementary. This trend is a little bit the opposite, where what's coming into our elementary schools is the oldest child in the family with 2 or 3 siblings, you know.
Yet to appear.
Well, the strollers are already there, they're there. We know they're on the way, you know. But it's a nice problem to have, you know, and I think it's a credit to all the work that everybody does across the town, from the selectmen to the finance committee in Brookline to the 2 budget committees for the Hollis and the co-op. I think, you know, people really look at these 2 communities as solid investments. You know?
Anyone have any other questions for Andy? Since we have it.
I have a question. How was the logo designed? Who was part of the team to come up with that logo?
It was it's similar to the logo that's in the multipurpose room here. It's just the letters that represent Hollis and Brookline. And they're intertwined. And it's something that we had started to use in some of our shirts and things like that. And just keeping it, you know, what I'll say very basic.
So there was no major group
No.
with
No.
representatives from all over the district
No.
providing inputs, none of that, okay.
No, it was already an existing logo, and we brought it back to the board. And the other piece, in all honesty, the experts, Teagan, Bond, and Quirk, were like, that will pop.
Okay,
You don't want to do a logo in the middle where nobody can understand what it is.
Right.
So sometimes keeping it simple is the best way to go. Well, with your permission, I'm going
Yes,
to exit
thank-
stage
thanks
left.
very
Thank you.
much.
Head off to college.
Yeah,
and-
you need to get ready for your suntan tomorrow. right?
Yeah.
I do, absolutely. And,
We'll be closely following, I'm sure.
yes, yes. And if anybody has any questions, just send me an email like you're always doing, I'll get back to you.
Okay, great.
All right,
Thank
Thanks so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Hi, have a
Thanks,
nice
Andy.
weekend.
Thank you, nice seeing you.
So Cindy, aside from those major topics, were there anything else with regard to the
No,
school board?
Kelly's
update?
probably gonna touch on, we did vote on her recommendation for the retained fund balance.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so that was the only other budget type
Mhm.
thing that we did.
Right, yeah, it's just the same, that we've always done that. I
The
always get
public-
Hollis and Co-op mixed up on the amounts, but I think it was 142
Yeah.
that we usually retain.
For the retained fund
For the
balance,
retained
yes.
fund.
Yeah, for the
Mhm,
retained,
mhm. Yeah, we're usually at 141, 142.
So the bottom line of what was given back to the district was?
I don't know yet,
Okay.
because Tim's just
finishing
barely
up.
giving me the information.
Do you have any estimates?
I'm not going to even.
Okay, all right. Let's move on. Let's move
Another
on.
couple weeks, it's fine. We'll know shortly, so at least something's going back. so.
Yes, I am pretty sure about that. I just
Mhm.
don't want-
Was there any discussion at the board about just, goals for the upcoming school year, or things they're interested in as we get to the planning process, or if you can to either-
Normally, in the September meeting, we discuss individually, or they ask what, our goals are for the year.
Mhm.
Now, Rick did a presentation in the July meeting of
Mhm.
the goals that, and the things that they were looking at last year and that achieved, and some
Right.
of the updates. So that would, if you have time, that would be a good presentation to look at. It was I don't know, it wasn't very long, but him and Bob, they both gave it's a PowerPoint, so you could
Yeah.
just look at the slides
Mhm.
instead of all the conversation.
And I thought time well spent would be watching the August board meeting, because Rick did talk through at least preliminarily that overview, that technology plan.
Yeah.
It's not that long, and
No.
it's just good to just kind of have a sense of it, of what's coming, and, you know, how they've outlined some things, so.
Yeah, and then he did do, I mean, if you look at the packet, there is a
Yes.
breakdown in the packet with dollar amounts.
Mhm. And
But
there's
like
also-
Andy said, that hoping that that's a high one.
So that's gonna be a
Right,
topic
right.
for next month?
I think it'll be a topic as we go through the budget planning, and usually we have the principals come in November, and I would expect Rick to give, that's probably one of his major initiatives.
Yeah.
So I would expect that as a discussion in
Yeah.
November. I was looking through some old agendas. We typically have done student services in September.
Okay.
I'm not sure if we did that early.
That might have been, I'm thinking
feel like it was-
October is normal, and we did it
Right, but I feel like
early.
we did it early last year, and I can't remember the reason why. Maybe it was just general availability, Amy's general availability.
Yeah, I think
So
it
we can
could
talk
be.
through whether September or
Okay.
October. October might be better, given the, transition and things like
Yeah.
that. There are no contracts to be negotiated this year,
No.
so really it is a pretty straightforward budget that would move to the warrant.
So our next meeting's gonna be in February, right?
Our next meeting, so I think, does anyone else have any, questions for Kelly or Cindy at this point? Any input they'd like to see from the school board? I think the school board does a really good job of addressing policies and policy updates at every meeting, so they're.
Yeah, for the summer, we kind of got sidetracked with the tech space and a couple of things, but we have a couple of things that we're working on right now. And then the SAU policy committee, we're trying to rework the evaluation form for Andy, or whoever comes.
That was another point at the last meeting, the last board meeting. Can you just talk for a couple of minutes about some of the initiatives that I think Rick was putting forward with some of the subcommittee work on related to, like, I don't know, grading standards?
Yeah, no, they've revitalized what we called best practice committee at one point, and they are looking at. They've been working over the summer, and now that the staff is back, I think Rick's intention is to get more of a scope of people in that. He's going to see who is interested in it, and depending on the numbers, I think he'll break it out into subcommittees. And there's discussion around one of them was class rank, one of them was weighting, and the third one escapes me right now. But there's, it's just discussion. It's nothing that we're looking at doing anything immediately about, but just looking at the way that the education system is going. Some of the colleges aren't even looking at SATs anymore. Are they looking at the weighted? Are they not looking at the weighted? The class rank issue has been ongoing on. So I think we're just trying to make sure that we're with the time, or maybe a little ahead of the time, the discussion, so that if we need to make changes, then we have the background for it.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions? Okay. I did want to mention that the SAU Budget Subcommittee membership is comprised of a representative of each budget or finance committee, each school board, Kelly, Andy, and Linda. Right? Yes, Linda has the SAU budget. Brian has been the Brookline Finance Committee member and representative for several years. I have been this committee's representative. As I do every year, open it up to any of you who might be interested in participating, to please let me know. Speak now or forever hold your peace, at least for this year. Because the first meeting is on Friday, September 20th, right?
Oh, they meet on Fridays, huh?
That's
Well,
like
the
the only day.
if you saw the
Yeah.
chart of availability, it was
You can have
literally
it.
the only day. So I'm happy to participate, but again, I want to be fair and just see if anyone else is interested. I will
You're doing a
happily-
fine job.
Thank you. I will happily join you on the 20th with Brian. I think you're available, and I don't know who the Hollis. It might be Mike Harris again. He's been doing it pretty
Yes,
consistently.
like
so.
hers, yes.
It's a good group. And I believe your meeting indicated, your notes indicated the first governing board meeting is like that first week of October.
Yes,
is.
it normally is the 10th, or normally based
Second,
on
yeah,
the-
it's normally the second week,
Yeah,
it's the first
but
week because of the
there's-
Jewish holiday
Oh,
and some
okay.
other
It's bumped up.
conflicts.
Oh.
And one other interesting thing about that meeting that you might be interested in is that normally each district, the principals will do a presentation at the beginning of the year for their district on what to expect for the year. This year, all of the principals are coming to the governing board meeting on October 3rd to give that overview for the entire governing board, because you don't, as your district, don't maybe get to understand what the elementary kids are doing and how that will come to you as well. So I think it will be
Yeah.
a very interesting presentation if anyone's interested in going.
That's great. And so where is that meeting from?
I'm not sure. It's,
I know it
the
alternates
October meeting is
sometimes.
usually at CSDA, but
Yeah.
don't quote me on
Yeah,
that
I
right
forgot.
now.
We'll follow up and see where that ends up being. Other than that, I don't really have any other announcements. Brian?
So just remind everybody that Saturday, September 21st is when Brookline is celebrating our 250th anniversary. We have an enormous parade scheduled that starts at 2 o'clock, so people need to get there early. There'll be parking places, but certainly not on Main Street. Main Street's going to be absolutely shut down. It is going to be huge. We've got groups coming in from all over the country and possibly outside of the country. There's going to be some events going on, mostly for kids at the baseball field afterwards, and there's going to be a big fireworks display that night, and perhaps some other events going on. So
Where's the
pay attention to
fireworks
that. Lake Potanipo,
Okay.
where we always do our town fireworks for the 4th of July.
Great, thank you. Brian was mentioning at the beginning of the meeting that the Brookline Finance Committee is in need of representation.
Yes.
So we can help spread the word or
Yes. Yeah, so we now have 2 openings on the Brookline Finance Committee that the Select Board are looking to fill. That would be a commitment just until March, until the March elections. But if anyone is interested, they need to send a letter of interest to Town Administrator Tad Putney by Friday, September 6th at noontime. That's the deadline. So thank you. And you can contact me through our email address is fincom, FINCOMM at brookline.nh.us if you need any other information.
Great, thank you. So our next scheduled meeting would be fourth Thursday of September, which is September 26th. And I think that's all I have.
No, it's not.
September 26th.
I was, what else? I was going to say.
We skipped over minutes, approval of minutes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Did you get my comments this morning?
I did.
Okay.
I looked at them right before the meeting.
All right, thanks.
So,
Okay,
Yeah, thank you for the
thank you
comments.
for that reminder, and at this point, I'll take a motion for the approval of the minutes from the June 27th meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes as amended by me, drafted this morning.
Great, thanks, Raul, seconded by,
I'll second.
great. Any questions, comments, other changes? Seeing none. All those in favor of the amended draft minutes, raise your hand. Great. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Opposed? Abstentions? 601. Did I say that right? Yeah, 601. I think I forgot to, did I mention at the beginning that Dave Glenn is absent?
No,
I don't
you
think I
didn't.
did. My apologies to Dave Glenn if he's watching. Dave Glenn is absent from this evening, with an excused absence.
We missed him.
We did, we always do.
Mhm.
So, process observer,
We are well ahead of schedule, huzzah. Like a half hour ahead of schedule. Yay.
That makes Tom happy.
Mhm.
At this point, at 7:45, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Raoul, seconded by
Me, Brian.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
They're never, it's always unanimous. I love it. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.